Every morning, as the first grey light filters through the towering glass facades of Mercy General Hospital in downtown Chicago, I begin my ritual in the cluttered sanctuary of my office on the neurology ward. The air carries the sharp, lingering tang of antiseptic, mingling with the bitter steam rising from my black coffee, brewed strong enough to cut through the fog of another sleepless night. I sit at my desk, surrounded by stacks of EEG printouts. Their jagged lines are familiar language I've deciphered for 18 years. These electroencephalograms, or EEGs, essentially graphs that capture the brain's electrical symphony, much like a polygraph detects the subtle rhythms of truth and deception, have been my compass. In my career, I've pored over thousands of them, unraveling the mysteries of epilepsies that seize the body like unexpected storms and tumors that erode the mind's architecture from within. Always, I've relied on empirical data, measurable, repeatable, grounded in the firing of neurons that I view as nothing more than a vast, intricate circuit board. Anomalies, they dissolve under scrutiny, reduced to errors in calibration or overlooked variables. This methodical approach has defined me, Dr. Elias Thorne, head of neurology here, with publications in neurology and The Lancet attesting to my precision. I recall one case vividly, a benchmark of my authority that still anchors me amid the ward's ceaseless hum of monitors and the soft squeak of vinyl floors under nurses' hurried steps. It was a young man presenting with progressive weakness, dismissed by others as psychosomatic, but his EEG revealed subtle theta wave disruptions, those slow oscillations that signal deeper brain dysfunction, akin to ripples in a pond betraying a hidden current below. Cross-referencing with MRI scans, I diagnosed a rare prion disease, a protein misfolding that devours neural tissue like rust on iron. My intervention, though palliative, extended his life and solidified the hospital's faith in my protocols. Such triumphs remind me that the brain, for all its complexity, yields to logic. Yet the night shifts erode that certainty in subtle ways. Up here on the upper floors, accessible only by the groaning keyed elevators that isolate us like a fortress in the sky, the corridors stretch empty under flickering fluorescent lights, casting elongated shadows that dance with each distant wail of ambulances far below. The city skyline twinkles mockingly through the windows, a reminder of the world beyond our sterile bubble. Lately, an unease has crept in, unexplained absences among the staff, whispers of sudden misfortunes, a nurse found slumped in the stairwell, heart arrested without warning. Coincidences, I tell myself, but they linger like an undiagnosed symptom. That morning, as I set down my coffee, the door swung open without a knock. In strode a woman in a rumpled trench coat, badge glinting under the harsh lights. Detective Maria Reyes, her sharp eyes scanning the room with unyielding skepticism. "Dr. Thorne," she said, voice clipped, "we need to talk about Nurse Harlan's death. It wasn't natural." Her words hung in the air, a challenge to my rational world, pulling me toward a patient file I'd yet to fully confront. The encounter with Detective Reyes left a faint tremor in my nerves, like a misfired synapse, as I navigated the neurology ward's sterile corridors toward the intensive care unit. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, their flicker casting jagged shadows on the squeaky vinyl floors, while the air carried the cold bite of antiseptic undercut by the metallic tang of medical equipment. I clutched the chart of Jane Doe, admitted 3 days ago after a hit-and-run left her comatose. A coma, in simple terms, is the brain's emergency shutdown, like a computer entering safe mode to protect its core systems. Her vital signs were stable, pulse steady, respiration unlabored, yet her eyes remained sealed, her body unresponsive. This wasn't unusual. Diffuse brain trauma from accidents often locks patients in such limbo. But something about her chart gnawed at me, an instinct honed over 18 years of decoding the brain's electrical whispers. In the diagnostics lab, a dimly lit cave of humming monitors and cold metal surfaces, I prepped Jane Doe for an EEG. The electroencephalogram measures brain waves. Think of it like a radio picking up signals from a storm of neural activity. I attached electrodes to her scalp, their adhesive chill against her skin, and watched the screen as jagged lines began to dance. Typically, a comatose brain shows flat, sluggish waves, like a calm sea after a tempest. But hers, spikes and troughs erupted in chaotic bursts, resembling Morse code tapped out in a hurricane. I froze, recalibrating the machine, certain of a glitch. Yet the patterns held, defying every textbook I'd studied. Brains don't do this. They react to stimuli in the present, not some uncharted future. It was as if her mind was broadcasting a signal it shouldn't know how to send. Cross-referencing the EEG data with hospital records, I noticed a chilling correlation. Those erratic spikes aligned with the exact times of recent staff deaths. Nurse Harlan's heart attack at 2:17 a.m., a janitor's fatal slip in the stairwell at 11:43 p.m. Each event was preceded by a unique wave pattern, hours before, as if her brain had predicted them. This was impossible. Neurology doesn't forecast events like a weather map. The brain processes now, not later, its electrical impulses bound by the physics of the moment. My rational mind, built on years of empirical victories, recoiled. There had to be a logical explanation, electromagnetic interference perhaps, or an undetected seizure disorder. Yet the precision of the data mocked my skepticism, eroding the foundation of my belief that every anomaly yields to science. Detective Reyes joined me in the lab, her trench coat brushing against a monitor as she reviewed security footage on her tablet. "No foul play," she said, her voice sharp with dismissal. "Just bad luck." I hesitated, then showed her the EEG printouts, my finger tracing the uncanny spikes. "This isn't coincidence," I admitted, my voice betraying a crack of doubt. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't argue, her skepticism softening into curiosity. As we stood there, the air thick with the whir of cooling fans, I felt a faint, disorienting pulse. A whisper of vertigo, like hearing a scream before it happened. It was gone in an instant, but it left my pulse racing, pulling me toward a deeper abyss of questions I wasn't ready to face. The faint whisper of that disorienting pulse lingered in my mind like an afterimage burned into a retina, compelling me to delve deeper into Jane Doe's enigma. I returned to the diagnostics lab that evening, the hospital's upper floors enveloping me in their isolated hush, the distant groan of the elevator fading into silence, broken only by the steady whir of cooling fans and the acrid scent of overheated circuits mingling with residual antiseptic. Fluorescent lights hummed above, casting harsh, unyielding shadows across the scattered printouts on the metal workbench. I reran the EEG tests methodically, electrodes reattached to her unmoving form in the adjacent monitoring room, her chest rising and falling in mechanical rhythm under the dim glow of vital sign monitors. This time, the spikes sharpened, forming a pattern that mirrored the impending arrhythmia of Dr. Simmons, a cardiologist on the floor below, predicted down to the minute, 3:42 a.m., with waves mimicking the erratic fibrillation of a failing heart. Electroencephalograms capture the brain's current electrical activity, not prophecies. It's like trying to forecast an entire city's traffic patterns by staring at a single stoplight. Impossible, bound by the laws of causality and biology. Yet here it was, data-defying logic, each spike a silent accusation against my 18 years of rational practice. I paced the confined space, the cold tile underfoot sending chills up my legs, my mind racing through procedural checklists. Could it be interference? I calibrated the machine again, the clicks of dials echoing unnaturally loud in the isolation. No faults detected. Internally, doubts crept in. Science had always been my anchor, reducing consciousness to synaptic firings, but this suggested something more. A thread pulling at the seams of what I knew about the mind's boundaries. Was death not the end, but a glitch where awareness lingered, echoing forward? The thought unsettled me, a philosophical tremor I pushed aside for empirical pursuit. Seeking validation, I consulted colleagues in the staff lounge, a cramped room with flickering vending machine lights and the stale smell of reheated coffee permeating the air. Dr. Patel, a young resident with wide eyes and a clipboard clutched like a shield, suggested equipment malfunction outright. "These old EEGs glitch all the time," he said. his voice laced with the optimism of inexperience. We clashed briefly. My authority, forged from diagnosing strokes that mimicked migraines and epilepsies hidden in subtle waves, asserted itself as I demonstrated the test's consistency. He backed down, but his doubt mirrored my own eroding confidence. The late-night session amplified the ward's isolation. Outside, Chicago's skyline blurred into dark mirrored voids, city noises dissolving into an ominous quiet that pressed against the windows like an unseen presence. Alone again, I reflected on how this case challenged the theme I'd built my career on: consciousness as mere biology, not a vessel for the inexplicable. Detective Reyes arrived unannounced, her boots echoing down the corridor as she entered the lab, carrying a folder thick with police reports. I shared the latest EEG data, spreading printouts under the harsh light, my finger tracing the predictive curves. She cross-checked against her notes, her skepticism a grounding force. "This looks like pattern matching after the fact," she muttered, but her brow furrowed as correlations mounted. Digging deeper, she uncovered Jane Doe's background. No driver's license, no social security trace, as if she'd materialized from thin air post-accident, like she never existed before the crash, Reyes said, her voice dropping. This escalated the mystery, blending medical anomaly with human enigma. As we pored over the files, a fragmented vision struck me, the first clear temporal echo. I saw Dr. Simmons clutching his chest in the hallway, his gasp echoing in my ears seconds before the hospital intercom crackled with a code blue. The room spun, the metallic tang sharpening in my mouth, my heart pounding as if sinking to the phantom rhythm. It blurred my sense of time, a disorienting haze where past and future collided, forcing me to grip the workbench to steady myself. To build tension, I ordered an MRI the next morning, escorting Jane Doe to the imaging suite, where the machine's thunderous clangs reverberated like distant artillery. The air chilled and heavy with the ozone scent of high-powered magnets. Magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI, visualizes brain structure, like an X-ray but for thoughts, mapping tissues with magnetic fields to reveal hidden damages. The results showed no structural lesions, no bleeds or swells, yet heightened neural connectivity flared across the scans, synapses lit like a city grid at midnight. In a coma, the brain should dim, not blaze with activity. This hyperstate suggested a shutdown organ paradoxically alive, defying the basic tenet that comatose patients exhibit reduced firing, not amplified networks. Thematically, it gnawed at me. If death wasn't final, could consciousness persist in such glitches, unbound by the body? The isolation of the suite, with its thick lead doors sealing us in, intensified the dread. Subtle horrors, whispering of realities beyond science's grasp. We concluded with a staff meeting in the conference room, fluorescent bulbs buzzing overhead, the air thick with tension and the faint odor of whiteboard markers. I presented findings cautiously, charts projected on the wall casting elongated shadows. Doubt rippled through the room, murmurs of coincidence and stress-induced paranoia. But as the meeting adjourned, another prediction fulfilled. A nurse's aneurysm, timed to the EG spike from hours prior. Gasps echoed, paranoia heightening like a rising tide. My hands trembled slightly as I gathered my notes, the ward's isolation now a cage, prompting me toward riskier experiments that loomed inevitable. The paranoia from that staff meeting clung to me like the chill of the hospital's overworked air conditioning, driving me to escalate my experimentation despite the risks. I arranged for Jane Doe's isolation in a dedicated monitoring room on the neurology ward's far end, a space rarely used, its cold tile floors echoing every footstep and the constant beep of solitary monitors amplifying the sense of detachment from the bustling floors below. The air in there carried a sterile sharpness, laced with the faint ozone from electrical equipment, while the window offered only a view of Chicago's night sky, stars obscured by the city's perpetual glow reflecting off the glass like distorted mirrors. I supervised the transfer myself, wheeling her bed through the dimly lit corridors, where fluorescent lights flickered sporadically, casting elongated shadows that seemed to stretch toward us. Once settled, I reconnected the EEG, the electrode's cold gel pressing into her scalp amid the whir of the machine powering up. The anomaly intensified almost immediately, the brainwaves now weaving in personal details, spikes correlating not just to a nurse's impending fall, but embedding echoes of her hidden chronic illness, a leukemia she'd confided to no one. This was beyond prediction. EEGs require external input to reflect such specifics, like a locked safe suddenly spilling its contents without a key. Brains don't access unspoken secrets. They process sensory data in real time, bound by neural pathways, not omniscience. As I monitored the screen, the room's isolation pressed in, the distant wail of an ambulance below fading into a heavy silence, broken only by the rhythmic beeps. Internally, my methodical mind fractured further. I'd always viewed time as linear, a sequence of causes and effects, much like a neuron's impulse traveling from dendrite to axon. But this suggested a glitch, where consciousness might loop recursively beyond death, an existential fear that gnawed at my core beliefs. What if the mind wasn't confined to the now, but an eternal echo chamber? The thought sent a shiver through me, my hands steadying on the cold metal cart as I noted the escalating patterns. The temporal glitches struck harder then, no longer faint whispers, but vivid, fragmented echoes. I relived the nurse's fall in real time, a sudden vertigo where I felt the slick tile under my own feet, heard her muffled cry echoing in my ears as if from a parallel moment, my vision blurring with overlapping images of her tumbling down the stairwell. The phantom impact jolted my knee, a sharp pain mirroring her fracture, dissipating only as the actual code echoed through the intercom minutes later. Disorientation flooded me, the room spinning slightly, the metallic tang of fear coating my tongue. This challenged everything, my stability, my faith in linear time, as if causality had unraveled, probing the dread that consciousness could trap us in endless loops. Death merely a pause in an infinite replay. I slumped into a chair, the vinyl creaking under my weight, breathing deeply to reclaim composure amid the beeping solitude. Collaboration with Detective Reyes deepened in that isolated vigil. She arrived with a team of forensic experts, their footsteps a rare intrusion into the quiet. Carrying laptops and evidence bags, she spread out reports on a side table, the paper rustling softly under the harsh light. Fingerprints came back clean. No matches in any database, she said, her voice steady but edged with unease, revealing Jane Doe as a ghost in the system. Her ally role shifted palpably. Once a pure skeptic, she now witnessed my echo-induced panic, my sudden gasp, hands clutching my knee. As the vision hit, "What the hell was that?" she demanded, her eyes widening, adding interpersonal tension that mirrored my internal unraveling. We pored over the data together, her no-nonsense demeanor clashing with my clinical explanations, yet forging a reluctant belief as correlations piled up like undeniable evidence in a courtroom. Delving into historical records took us to the hospital's archives, a dimly lit basement vault accessed by a creaking freight elevator, dust motes dancing in the weak bulb light, and the musty scent of aged paper enveloping us like a shroud. Shelves stretched into shadows, files yellowed and brittle under my gloved hands as I pulled volumes from decades past. We uncovered similar unsolved cases. A coma patient in the 70s whose monitors spiked before staff accidents, dismissed as urban legend. Another in the 90s with predictive anomalies buried in redacted reports. This escalated the scientific contradiction. How could patterns recur across eras without a unifying mechanism? While personally, it unraveled my emotional armor. Insomnia had set in, nights blurred by replaying echoes, doubts whispering that science's limits hid horrors where consciousness defied death. Reyes's flashlight beam cut through the gloom, highlighting faded ink, her presence a tether, as we pieced together a pattern too coherent for coincidence. The confrontation peaked during a late-night vigil back in the monitoring room. The clock ticking past midnight with the city's hum reduced to a distant murmur. The EEG spiked wildly, screens flickering as waves predicted my own involvement. A subtle arrhythmia in my future, detailed with personal precision. A whisper-like echo pulled me in. I felt my chest tighten, vision tunneling into a fragmented future where I collapsed amid the beeps, the cold floor rising to meet me. Panic surged, the air thickening with the sharp scent of sweat, my pulse racing as reality bent. It built an unbearable suspense, the machine's hum morphing into an ominous drone, demanding answers I feared to uncover. The relentless drone of the EEG in Jane Doe's isolated monitoring room had become a heartbeat in my ears, its rhythmic beeps syncing with the pulse of dread that had taken root since that last predictive spike implicated me. I stood in the operating theatre now, its sterile air heavy with the sharp tang of iodine and the cold gleam of overhead lights reflecting off polished steel instruments. The textured vinyl floor squeaked faintly under my surgical boots, and the faint hum of the ventilation system underscored the silence between the assembled team. 2 residents, a nurse and myself, all gowned in blue, masks obscuring faces but not the tension in their eyes. We were about to attempt an experimental stimulation procedure on Jane Doe, a desperate bid to wake her, using targeted electrical pulses to her cortex. In simple terms, it's like jump-starting a car battery, but for the brain. A risky maneuver, but the escalating predictions demanded action. The EEG machine, now a conduit for impossible foresight, stood sentinel at her bedside, its screen flickering with chaotic waves. These patterns had peaked overnight, predicting multiple staff deaths. 2 nurses, a janitor, in chilling detail, down to the minute and manner. This defied physics. Electrical energy in a brain can't manifest foresight, like a river flowing upstream against gravity's pull. My hands, steady from 18 years of precision, trembled slightly as I adjusted the stimulator's settings, the weight of this anomaly pressing against my rational core. The procedure began methodically, electrodes placed with clinical precision on Jane Doe's scalp, their cold gel leaving faint imprints. I explained to the team that we were targeting the prefrontal cortex, the brain's decision-making hub, akin to the control room of a vast network. But as the first pulse fired, the EEG erupted, wild, jagged spikes flooding the screen, far beyond normal neural response. My stomach churned, the antiseptic air suddenly stifling, as the patterns wove a tapestry of predicted fatalities, each spike a death knell. Internally, I grappled with the shattering of my worldview. I'd built my career on the brain as a predictable machine, reducible to chemical and electrical laws. Yet here, the data suggested Jane Doe's coma was a hub for temporal anomalies, her consciousness trapping fragments of time like a shattered mirror reflecting infinite futures. This wasn't biology, it was an existential rift, probing the fear that life and death were illusions in a flawed reality where time looped endlessly. The temporal glitches overwhelmed me mid-procedure, no longer fleeting echoes, but full immersions. As I adjusted a dial, I was pulled into a vivid loop. I saw Nurse Carter collapse in the hallway, her scream piercing my ears. Then the janitor, slipping on a wet floor, his skull cracking with a sickening thud. The visions overlapped, my own pulse racing as I felt their pain, sharp, visceral, my knees buckling under phantom impacts. The theatre spun, the metallic tang of blood mixing with iodine in my senses, my vision blurring as past, present, and future bled together. I gripped the table, the cold steel grounding me, but the horror deepened. This wasn't prediction, but experience, as if I were living their deaths in real time. The thematic weight crushed me. If consciousness could transcend linear time, was death merely a glitch, trapping us in eternal fragments? My belief in science's limits unraveled, replaced by a dread that the mind might be a recursive prison. Detective Reyes burst into the theatre, her boots echoing sharply, her trench coat stark against the sterile blue. She'd been combing through classified files, her face pale as she thrust a folder at me. She's a survivor of a 1980s neural experiment, Project Chronos, buried by the government, she said, voice low. The documents detailed attempts to amplify brain connectivity, abandoned after subjects exhibited temporal anomalies. Jane Doe was one of them, her identity erased, her coma a side effect of a mind rewired to receive time's echoes. Her ally role solidified. She pulled me back from the edge, her hand steady on my arm as another glitch hit, my chest tightening with my own predicted arrhythmia. "We have to stop this," she urged, her skepticism now belief, her presence a lifeline amid the chaos. Together, we disconnected the EEG, the machine's hum dying with a final, mournful whine, but the echoes persisted, faint whispers of future pains lingering in my senses. The core truth emerged as we pieced through the data in the flickering light, the room's sterile chill seeping into my bones. Jane Doe's brain wasn't just reacting, it was a receiver for temporal anomalies, a biological impossibility. Brains process the present, not the past or future, like a radio tuned to one station at a time. This defied that, suggesting her consciousness was a conduit, trapping time fragments in a recursive loop. I explained this to Reyes using an analogy. It's as if her mind was a broken clock, ticking in all directions at once. Accepting this forced me to confront science's limits, a humbling unraveling of my identity as a neurologist who'd tamed the brain's mysteries with logic. The climax came as the procedure collapsed into chaos, alarms blaring as Jane Doe's vitals spiked, her body twitching under the pulses. Then, the shattering moment. A final echo engulfed me, my own death unfolding. A vision of collapsing in this very room, my heart stuttering as monitors screamed. I felt the cold floor, the fading light, the suffocating weight of finality. Yet I snapped back, gasping, alive but forever altered. The team stared, unaware of my internal descent, as I ordered the procedure halted. Jane Doe stabilized, her EEG flatlining into normalcy, but the echoes lingered in me, a haunting residue of a reality rewired. I stumbled from the theatre, Reyes's steadying hand guiding me, the corridor's flickering lights, a tunnel to an aftermath I couldn't yet face. The corridor's flickering lights blurred into a haze as Detective Reyes guided me away from the operating theatre, her grip firm on my elbow, the sterile air still thick with the acrid residue of electrical discharge, and my own ragged breaths. I leaned against the cold wall for a moment, the vinyl floor cool beneath my palms, grounding me as the echoes faded to a dull throb in my temples. But they didn't vanish entirely. Those fragmented whispers of time, like static from a distant radio signal, lingered at the edges of my perception. In the days that followed, as the hospital returned to its rhythmic hum of monitors and hurried footsteps, I retreated to my office to compile the official report. The space felt smaller now, cluttered with EEG printouts scattered like fallen leaves, the faint scent of stale coffee mingling with the metallic tang of printer ink. Outside the window, Chicago's skyline mocked normalcy, the towering glass facades reflecting a bustling city indifferent to the rifts I'd glimpsed. I sat at my desk, the wooden surface worn from years of note-taking, and began typing, my fingers methodical on the keys despite the tremor in my hands. The report was an exercise in bureaucratic sanitization. I downplayed the anomalies as statistical coincidences, erratic EEG patterns attributed to equipment artifacts, the staff deaths to unrelated misfortunes like undiagnosed conditions or accidents. Electroencephalograms, after all, measure brain activity in the moment, not orchestrate prophecies. Any correlation was dismissed as hindsight bias, much like seeing shapes in clouds after a storm has passed. Internally, however, the thematic impact gnawed relentlessly. What if consciousness survived in glitches, unbound by the body's decay? My professional identity, built on 18 years of reducing the mind to neural circuits, eroded like sandstone under persistent waves. I paused often, staring at the screen, the cursor blinking accusingly, as faint echoes resurfaced, a whisper of pain from a death I'd lived, blurring the line between memory and premonition. Science had failed to contain this. The brain wasn't just a machine, but perhaps a receiver for temporal fragments, challenging the very definition of existence. The resignation came amid a quiet ceremony in the hospital's boardroom, a sterile space with polished oak tables and the faint hum of an air conditioner, circulating recycled air laced with the subtle odor of lemon polish. Colleagues gathered sparingly. Dr. Patel, the resident who'd once clashed with me over malfunctions, nodded solemnly. The administrator shook my hand with a practiced sympathy. I stood at the podium, my voice clinical as I cited personal reasons and accumulated fatigue, the words echoing hollowly off the walls, no mention of the temporal glitches that now haunted my every quiet moment, the way a sudden vertigo could pull me into a loop of someone else's end. Detective Reyes attended, standing at the back in her trench coat, her presence a silent anchor. Afterward, we spoke in the hallway, the fluorescent lights casting long shadows on the squeaky vinyl. "You were right about her," she said, her voice softened by an evolved perspective, handing me a sealed envelope with the final Project Kronos files. "But some truths don't fit reports." Her skepticism had transformed into a shared unease, offering a semblance of closure as we exchanged a nod. Yet, as she walked away, a faint echo whispered, a fragment of her future laugh, incongruent and unsettling, reminding me the glitches persisted like whispers in daily life. Reflecting on the haunting legacy consumed my final hours at the hospital. The staff deaths had halted post-disconnection. Jane Doe was transferred to a long-term facility, her EEG now mundane flatlines, as if the rift had sealed with the unplugging of wires. But my reality was rewired irrevocably. I packed my office slowly, the rustle of papers and the clink of mugs amplifying the isolation. The city skyline outside turning to dark mirrored voids as evening fell. The experience lingered like a shattered mirror, each shard reflecting infinite selves, versions of me trapped in temporal loops, questioning if death was an end or merely a pause in consciousness's recursive dance. This analogy captured the persistent dread. No longer could I trust the linear flow of time, each moment potentially echoing another's demise. In the forward glance of my new life, I retreated to a quiet apartment on the city's outskirts, the distant wail of ambulances a rare intrusion into my self-imposed isolation. The echoes continue faintly, a phantom ache during mundane tasks, a whisper of foresight in dreams, haunting temporal fragments that affirm this story as my confession. I've documented it here, not for absolution, but to warn. The limits of science hide abysses where consciousness defies death, leaving us forever altered in the glitch.